Rio de Janeiro, Part 1.
Rio de Janeiro, Part 1. Table of Contents.
All about Rio de Janeiro. With visiting and touring information. Geography. History. Attractions. And other points of interest.
Dr. Sydney Soclof. Dr. Sydney 22@gmail.com. 2023. Narration by Dr. Sydney Soclof.
Zoe Phonemes.
And Nathan Koltove. For a complete discussion of YouTube navigation, please go to tiny.1/ytnavigator.
Rio de Janeiro.
Rio de Janeiro, River of January, commonly referred to simply as Rio, is the capital city of the state of Rio de Janeiro. Rio is the second largest city of Brazil and the third largest metropolitan area in agglomeration in South America.
Rio is the 6th largest city in the Americas and the 26th largest in the world. Rio de Janeiro is nicknamed the Cidade Maravilhosa or Marvelous City.
This is the Bandeira do Município do Rio de Janeiro. Oh, the flag of Rio de Janeiro.
This is the shield, or escudo, of Rio de Janeiro.
Rio was the capital of Brazil for nearly 2 centuries. From 1763 to 1815 during the Portuguese colonial era. From 1815 to 1821 as the capital of the United Kingdom of Portugal, Brazil and Algarves. And from 1822 to 1960 as an independent nation.
Rio de Janeiro represents the 2nd largest GDP in Brazil, and 30th largest in the world, and is the headquarters of 2 major Brazilian companies, Petrobras and Vale, and major oil companies and telephony in Brazil, besides the largest conglomerate of media and communications companies in Latin America. The global organizations.
Rio de Janeiro is the home of the many universities and institutes. It is the 2nd largest center of research and development in Brazil, accounting for 17% of national scientific production. Rio de Janeiro is the most visited city in the Southern Hemisphere. It is known for its natural settings, carnival celebrations, samba, bossa nova, and beaches such as Copacabana, Ipanema and Leblon. Some of the most famous landmarks in addition to the beaches include the giant statue of Christ, the Redeemer, Cristo Redentor, atop Corcovado Mountain.
This statue has been named as one of the 7 wonders of the modern world.
There is also Sugarloaf Mountain, Pau de Sucre, with its cable car.
And the Sambódromo, a permanent grandstand lined parade avenue which is used during Carnival. And Maracanã Stadium, one of the world's largest football stadiums. This is the Maracanã Stadium. Where's Rio de Janeiro?
Rio de Janeiro is on the Atlantic coast in the southern part of Brazil.
The region is very diverse, including the major business center of São Paulo, the historical region of Minas Gerais and its capital Belo Horizonte, the 3rd largest metropolitan area in Brazil. The region also includes the beaches of Rio de Janeiro and the coast of Espírito Santo. We see São Paulo, followed by Rio de Janeiro are the 2 largest cities, by far, in Brazil. The other major cities have a much smaller population.
This shows the growth in the population of Rio de Janeiro. Brazil is divided into these 26 states and a federal district, which contains the capital city, Brasília. Rio de Janeiro is in the state of the same name.
The state of Rio de Janeiro is one of the smallest in area, ranking 23rd out of 26 and is comparable in area to Denmark.
The state of Rio de Janeiro is in third place in population, with 16 million.
Rio de Janeiro is along the South Atlantic coast by the Baía de Guanabara.
This is Rio de Janeiro and vicinity.
Rio de Janeiro lies on a strip of Brazil's Atlantic coast, close to the Tropic of Capricorn, where the shoreline is oriented east and west,
facing largely south. The city was founded on an inlet of this stretch of the coast, Guanabara Bay de Guanabara, and its entrance is marked by a point of land called Soclof Pau de Suca, a calling card of the city. Soclof Mountain is near the center of Rio, and at the entrance to the de Guanabara from the Atlantic Ocean. This shows the central area of Rio and the entrance of the de Guanabara to the Atlantic Ocean.
Here are the beach towns of Copacabana, Ipanema, and Leblon on the Atlantic coast.
Here is a perspective view of some of the main sites of Rio. This is a map of central Rio.
The Centro, the Co of Rio, lies on the plains of the western shore of Guanabara Bay.
The greater portion of the city, commonly referred to as the North Zone Zona Norte, extends to the northwest on plains composed of marine and continental sediments and on hills and several rocky mountains.
The South Zone Zona Sul of the city, reaching the beaches fringing the open sea, is cut off from the center and from the North Zone by coastal mountains.
The large West Zone Zona, long cut off by the mountainous terrain, had been made accessible by new roads and tunnels by the end of the 20th century.
The population of the city of Rio de Janeiro is about 6.3 million. The population of the greater metropolitan area is estimated at 11 to 13.5 million.
Rio was Brazil's capital until 1960, when Brasília took its place. The history of Rio de Janeiro. Where did the name Rio de Janeiro come from? And where's the river? There doesn't seem to be any river of significant size here. Only the Bay of Guanabara.
Europeans first encountered Guanabara Bay on January 1, 1502. Hence Rio de Janeiro, or January River, by a Portuguese expedition under explorer Gaspar de Lemos, who was a captain of a ship in Pedro Álvares Cabral's fleet. Allegedly the Florentine explorer Amerigo Vespucci participated as an observer at the invitation of King Manuel I. in the latter's expedition. The region of Rio was inhabited by the Tupi, Puri, Botocudo and Maxacli peoples.
In 1555, one of the islands of Guanabara Bay, now called Ville-Gagnon Island, was occupied by 500 French colonists under the French Admiral Nicolas Durand de Ville-Gagnon.
Consequently, Ville-Gagnon built Fort Coligny on the island when attempting to establish the France Antarctique colony. The city of Rio de Janeiro proper was founded by the Portuguese on March 1, 1565. Until early in the 18th century, the city was threatened or invaded by several, mostly French, pirates and buccaneers, such as François Duclé and René de Gaitrouin.
The Bandeirantes, or followers of the banner, were Portuguese colonial scouts in Brazil. From 1670 to 1750 they focused on mineral wealth.
In the late 17th century, still during the sugar era, the Bandeirantes found gold and diamonds in the captaincy of Minas Gerais, neighboring Rio de Janeiro.
As a result of these expeditions, The Bandeirantes expanded Portuguese America from the small limits of the Tordesillas line to roughly the same territory as current Brazil.
This expansion led to the discovery of mineral wealth that made a fortune for Portugal during the 17th and 18th centuries.
Thus, Rio de Janeiro became a much more practical port for exporting wealth, gold, precious stones, besides sugar, than Salvador de Bahia, which is much farther to the northeast.
And so, in 1763, the colonial administration in Portuguese America was moved from Salvador to Rio de Janeiro.
Rio de Janeiro remained primarily a colonial capital until 1807, when the Portuguese royal family and most of the associated Lisbon nobles, fleeing from Napoleon's invasion of Portugal, moved to Rio de Janeiro.
The kingdom's capital was transferred to Rio, which, thus, became the only European capital outside of Europe. As there was no physical space or urban structure to accommodate hundreds of noblemen who arrived suddenly, many inhabitants were simply evicted from their homes.
There was a large influx of African slaves to Rio de Janeiro in 1819. There were 145,000 slaves in the captaincy. By 1840, the number of slaves reached 220,000 people. When Prince Pedro I proclaimed the independence of Brazil in 1822, he decided to keep Rio de Janeiro as the capital of his new empire.
Rio continued as the capital of Brazil after 1889, when the monarchy was replaced by a republic. Until the early years of the 20th century, the city was largely limited to the neighborhood now known as the historic downtown business district, at the mouth of Guanabara Bay. The city's center of gravity began to shift south and west to the so-called Zona South zone in the early part of the 20th century.
When the first tunnel was built under the mountains located between Botafogo and the neighborhood now known as Copacabana.
The natural beauty of the beach at Copacabana combined with the fame of the Copacabana Palace Hotel, the luxury hotel of the Americas in the 1930s, helped Rio to gain the reputation it still holds today as a beach party town. Although, this reputation has been somewhat tarnished in recent years by favela violence resulting from the narcotics trade.
This is Copacabana by Rio de Janeiro.
The 98-foot statue of Christ the Redeemer was unveiled in 1931 on the top of Corcovado Mountain. It served as a Brazilian monument to 100 years of independence from Portugal.
Plans for moving the nation's capital city to the territorial center had been occasionally discussed. When Juscelino Kubitschek was elected president in 1955, it was partially on the strength of promises to build a new capital. Though many thought that it was just campaign rhetoric, Kubitschek managed to have Brasilia built, at great cost. And in 1960 the capital of Brazil was officially moved from Rio de Janeiro to Brasilia.
Rio de Janeiro orientation.
This is the Rio de Janeiro area.
This is the Rio de Janeiro area and the Boia de Guanabara.
This is a map of Rio de Janeiro. This is another map of Rio de Janeiro.
This is another map of Rio de Janeiro and the surrounding area. This is another map of Rio de Janeiro and the surrounding area.
The south or Zona Sul area of Rio de Janeiro.
This is a view of the Copacabana beach from Sugarloaf.
The south zone of Rio de Janeiro, in Portuguese, Zona Sul, is composed of several districts, amongst which Alame, Copacabana, Panama, Leblon, and So Conrado, which comprise Rio's famous Atlantic beach coastline. The districts in the south zone are Gloria, Catete, Flamingo, Botafogo and Urca, which border Guanabara Bay, and Carissa, Cosme Velho, Laranjeiras, Humaita, Lagoa, Botanico and Gavia. This is a view of Copacabana Beach.
This is Copacabana Beach. The south zone of Rio de Janeiro, Zona Sul, is the richest region of the city and the most famous overseas. And the neighborhood of Leblon in particular has the most expensive real estate in all of South America.
This is Leblon and Panama.
This is a cycleway along Ipanema Beach.
This is Botafogo Morisco, a Botafogo neighborhood.
Lagoa, in English, lagoon, is an affluent residential neighborhood located around the Rodrigo de Freitas Lagoon. It borders the neighborhoods of Panama, Leblon, Copacabana, Gavia and Botanico and Humaita.
Lagoa is an upper-middle and upper-class neighborhood. It is also one of the few places in Rio de Janeiro without a favela, or slum.
The population of Lagoa is about 18,200 inhabitants. Around the Rodrigo de Freitas Lagoon there is a 7.5 kilometers long cycleway and many parks. This is Lagoa Rodrigo de Freitas.
This is Lagoa Rodrigo de Freitas. One of the highest hills in the city is the 2,762-foot, 842-meter, Pedra da Gavia, Crow's Nest Rock, near the Botanical Gardens. On the top of its summit is a huge rock formation, such as Eric von Däniken in his 1973 book, In Search of Ancient Gods, claim it to be a sculpture, resembling a sphinx-like bearded head that is visible for many kilometers around.
Since 1961, the National Park, Parque da, the largest city-surrounded urban forest and the second largest urban forest in the world, has been a national park.
These are some of the areas of Rio South, or Zona Sul. The largest urban forest in the world is the Floresta da Pedra Branca, White Rock Forest, which is also located in the city of Rio de Janeiro. The Pontifical Catholic University of Rio, Pontificia Universidade Católica do Rio de Janeiro or PUC Rio, Brazil's top private university, is located at the edge of the forest, in the Gavia district.
Centro, the central area of Rio de Janeiro.
The Santa Teresa tram is a historic suburban tram line connecting Largo da Carioca in downtown Rio with the Santa Teresa suburban, the hills.
The Santa Teresa tram is currently maintained mainly as a tourist attraction, and is designated a heritage tramway system.
The Teresa tram is the only remaining metropolitan tram system in Brazil and South America, having run continuously since its opening in 1875.
This shows the location of the Santa Teresa tram.
The Norte, north area of Rio de Janeiro. The north zone of Rio, Zona Norte, is home to the stadium, once the world's highest capacity football, soccer venue, able to hold nearly 200,000 people, as it did the World Cup final of 1950.
In recent times its capacity has been reduced to conform with modern safety regulations, and the stadium has introduced seating for all fans. Maracanã now has a capacity for 95,000 fans and will eventually hold around 120,000 people. Maracanã was the site for the opening and closing ceremonies and football competition of the 2007 Pan American Games and the final match of the 2014 FIFA World Cup. Maracanã hosted the opening and closing ceremonies and football matches of the 2016 Summer Olympic Games.
Besides, the North Zone of Rio also holds a few tourist and historical attractions, such as Manguinhos, the home of Instituto Oswaldo Cruz, a centenarian biomedical research institution.
Also in Norte is the beautiful Quinta da Boa Vista, a park where the historic Imperial Palace is located. The palace now hosts the National Museum, specializing in natural history, archaeology and ethnology.
The international airports of Rio de Janeiro, Galileo, Antonio Carlos Jobim International Airport, was named after the famous Brazilian musician Antonio Carlos Jobim.
Hail the beach towns of Copacabana, Panama, and Leblon on the Atlantic coast.
The main campus of the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro at Fundão Island and the State University of Rio de Janeiro are also located in the northern part of Rio.
This is the famous Brazilian musician, Antonio Carlos Jobim.
Santos Dumont Airport is used mainly for flights to São Paulo, some short and medium-haul domestic flights, and general aviation. Santos Dumont Airport is on Guanabara Bay, just a few blocks from downtown Rio.
The west side, in Portuguese, Zona Oeste, is the region furthest from the center of Rio de Janeiro.
Neighboring districts within the West Zone reveal stark differences between social classes.
The West Zone area has industrial zones, but some agricultural regions remain in its wide area. In this zone is Terra Encantada, an amusement park.
Westwards from the older zones is Barra da Tijuca, a flat expanse of formerly undeveloped coastal land, which is currently experiencing a wave of new construction.
Barra da Tijuca is an area of accelerated growth, attracting some of the more affluent sectors of the population as well as luxury companies. High-rise flats and sprawling shopping centers give the area a far more American feel than the crowded city center. The urban planning of the area, made in the late 1960s, resembles that of U.S. suburbs, though mixing zones of single-family houses with residential skyscrapers. The beaches of Barra da Tijuca are also popular with the city's residents. Barra da Tijuca was the home of the Pan American Village for the 2007 Pan American Games.
An Norte district that has exhibited economic growth is Campo Grande. Some sports competitions in the Pan American Games of 2007 we held here,
the sister city to Rio, and on the other side of Guanabara Bay is Niterói.
Many people live in Niterói and commute to Rio de Janeiro to work.
Besides the Ponte Rio Niterói, or the Rio Niterói Bridge, there are several ferry services that operate between the Rio Centro and Niterói.
Carioca is a Portuguese adjective, or demonym, that refers to the inhabitants of the metropolitan area of Rio de Janeiro. The original word Carioca comes from the indigenous Amerindian language of the Tupi people, meaning white man's house.
Don't confuse this word with karaoke. They like to sing karaoke, but a karaoke's.
According to a survey published in American Scientist magazine, the Cariocas of Rio de Janeiro exhibited great friendliness and offered to help in various situations. A quote from the article mentioned pointed to the following.
Fé is an important word in Brazil, simpático. It refers to a range of desirable social qualities, to be friendly, nice, agreeable, and good-natured. A person who is fun to be with and pleasant to deal with.
Horizontal ellipsis. Brazilians, especially the Cariocas of Rio, want very much to be seen as simpático. And going out of one's way to assist strangers is part of this image. In 2008, there were 11,513,000 people residing in the metropolitan region of Rio de Janeiro. The demographics were white, 53%, brown, multiracial, 35%, black, 12%, Asian 0.2%, and Amerindian 0.14%. Different ethnic groups contributed to the formation of the population of Rio de Janeiro. Before European colonization, at least 7 different indigenous peoples were speaking 20 languages in the region.
Some joined the Portuguese and others joined the French. Those who joined the French were then exterminated by the Portuguese, while the others assimilated.
Rio de Janeiro is home to the largest Portuguese population outside of Lisbon in Portugal. After its independence from Portugal, Rio de Janeiro became a destination for hundreds of thousands of immigrants from Portugal, mainly in the early 20th century.
The immigrants were mostly poor peasants who subsequently found prosperity in Rio as city workers and small traders. The influence of Portugal is still seen in many parts of the city, including architecture and language. The black community was formed with residents whose ancestors had been brought as slaves, mostly from Angola or Mozambique.
The Carnaval and Samba first appeared under the influence of the black community in the city. Today, nearly half of the city's population is black or part black.
As a result of the influx of immigrants to Brazil from the late 19th to the early 20th century, one may find in Rio de Janeiro communities of Jews, Arabs of Lebanese and Syrian origin, Italians, Spaniards, Germans, and people from different parts of Brazil. This is the distribution of the various religious groups in Rio de Janeiro. We see that Roman Catholics are the predominant group, although there is a substantial Protestant minority.
The economy of Rio de Janeiro.
The state of Rio de Janeiro has the second largest, behind only São Paulo, GDP of any city in Brazil, and the third largest in all of South America. Greater Rio de Janeiro is Brazil's second most important industrial area, trailing only São Paulo. A new electronics and computer sector has been added to the older industries of metallurgy, engineering, and printing and publishing.
The services sector comprises the largest portion of GDP, 66%, followed by the collection of taxes, 23%, industrial activity, 11%, and agribusinesses only, 0.04%.
Rio ranks second nationally in industrial production and as a financial and service center, trailing only São Paulo, because it was once the national capital. Rio de Janeiro was chosen as the site for the headquarters of many private, federal, multinational, and state corporations, even when they factories were located in the cities or states.
Despite the transfer of the capital to Brasília, many of these headquarters remained within the Rio de Janeiro metropolitan area, including those of Petrobras, a Brazilian multinational energy company, and the state oil company, Petrobras is the largest company in Latin America by market capitalization and revenue, and the largest company headquartered in the Southern Hemisphere by market value. Petrobras was founded in 1953, and while it ceased to be Brazil's legal monopoly in the oil industry in 1997, it remains a significant oil producer, with an output of more than 2 million barrels of oil equivalent per day, as well as a major distributor of oil products.
A newer electronics and computer sector has been added to the older industries of metallurgy, engineering, and printing and publishing. Other manufacturing sectors focus on the production of shipyard-related materials, apparel and footwear, textiles, non-metallic mineral products, food and beverages, chemicals, and pharmaceuticals.
Major Brazilian entertainment organizations are based in Rio de Janeiro like TV Globo, Globosat, Globo News, Sport TV, Telecena, TV Brazil, Net, Sky and Way Brazil.
And also some of Brazil's major newspapers, Jornal do Brasil, O Globo, O Dia, and Business Rio.
Major international pharmaceutical companies have their Brazilian headquarters in Rio, such as Merck, Roche, Aerodero, Baxter, Maine, and Maple.
The city has several universities. The Ministry of Education has certified approximately 99 higher education institutions in Rio.
There are some notable higher education institutions.
The Federal University of Rio de Janeiro, in Portuguese, Universidade Federal do Rio de Janeiro, UFRJ, is the largest federal university in Brazil, with 48,000 students and 9,000 staff.
The Pontificia Universidade Católica do Rio de Janeiro, Pontifical Catholic University of Rio de Janeiro, often abbreviated as PUC Rio, is a private and non-profit Catholic university. PUC Rio is one of the largest and most prestigious Brazilian universities, with 18,000 students and 800 faculty. It is maintained by the Catholic Archdiocese of Rio de Janeiro and the Society of Jesus.
Where will we be docked?
Cruise ships dock at the city's commercial port, Pier Moura. The downtown business district is within walking distance of the port. The pier is a working cargo port with no services, so there is little of interest to tourists there. Ships may arrange transportation to Copacabana, the Ipanema beaches, and the city center, or taxis are available.
The central part of Rio de Janeiro, where the major sites are located, is very walkable. Taxis are also readily available.
While Rio has an excellent public transportation system, buses and metro, they can be tricky to figure out for first-timers. The metro extends to Copacabana Beach and includes Ipanema.
This is a map of central Rio de Janeiro. Rio has been famous for its relatively high crime rate, particularly for pickpocketing. This is a port of call where organized ship tours can be a good idea.
In recent years, the city government has made an effort to clean up the city, and there are abundant tourist police in major areas, which has helped deter some crime.
Whichever option you choose, absolutely do not leave anything valuable in your stateroom safe, including items like earrings, wedding rings and expensive cameras. Follow the lead of locals. When Cariocas go to the local beaches, they just carry a towel, sunscreen and some petty cash to buy snacks and drinks from the numerous beach vendors.
Rio de Janeiro, Part 1 Table of Contents.
Thanks for watching. Please watch some more of my great videos.